from the Belle Époque to the Great War, a century of transformation. Welcome to this historical exploration that will lead us through one of the most fascinating and complex periods in contemporary history. Together, we will explore an era of great change, from the euphoria of progress to the profound tensions that would reshape the world. Our journey begins with the Belle Époque, a period that spanned the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was an era characterized by a widespread sense of progress and an almost contagious optimism, fueled by scientific discoveries and technological innovations. Yet beneath the glittering surface of this era lay growing geopolitical and social tensions. These turmoils would slowly but inexorably lead Europe and the entire world toward unprecedented conflict. The Belle Époque can be seen as the preparatory phase for what would become the First World War. It was a crucible of profound transformations that touched every aspect of life. The changes were radical and pervasive, manifesting themselves in the political, economic, and social spheres. New balances of power were emerging while industrialization advanced at a rapid pace. All these elements combined created fertile ground for the global conflagration that would soon erupt. Understanding the Belle Époque is essential to understanding the roots of the 20th century. At the same time, another crucial phenomenon was shaping international relations: colonialism and imperialism. European powers exercised unchallenged dominion over vast swathes of the globe. The motivations behind this expansion were manifold, ranging from economic ambitions in the search for raw materials and new markets to political ones of prestige and power. Each nation sought to assert its superiority. Concrete actions resulted in the systematic division and exploitation of entire territories. This process ignored local cultures and societies, imposing a Western model. The areas involved in this frenetic race for conquest were primarily Africa, Asia, and Oceania. Here, colonial empires expanded, reshaping the maps and the lives of millions of people. The consequences of this policy were dramatic and far reaching. It generated an increasingly acute rivalry between European nations, each jealous of its own possessions and eager for further expansion. This fueled exasperated nationalism, where national identity was often tied to colonial grandeur. The competition also erupted into a dangerous arms race, paving the way for conflict. At the same time, the world witnessed the unstoppable rise of mass society. This phenomenon, while developing in parallel with colonialism, had deep roots in the internal transformations of nations. The main characteristics of this new era were rampant urbanization, rapid industrial development, and the widespread diffusion of communications. Cities became the nerve centers of modern life. These dynamics led to profound transformations in the daily lives of millions of individuals. Mass production made goods accessible that had previously been the prerogative of a select few. Rising consumption became a driving force of the economy and an indicator of a new prosperity, albeit unequally distributed. At the same time, there was a significant growth in trade unions, which fought for workers' rights. Despite the progress, this new social structure also brought new challenges. The creation of economic and social inequalities worsened, making disparities more evident. This inevitably generated new social tensions, manifested in strikes, protests, and demands. Mass society, with its bright and dark sides, was ready to face the challenges of the new century. 1914 marked the beginning of one of the most traumatic events in human history, World War I. This conflict, despite having a precise start date, is rooted in a complex series of causes layered over time. It wasn't a single event, but a web of political, economic, and social factors that had been building for decades. Understanding their interaction is essential to grasping the full scope of the conflict. Among the determining factors was an exasperated nationalism, which led nations to self celebration and destructive competition. Imperialistic rivalries, as we have seen, further exacerbated tensions. A crucial role was also played by the complex network of military alliances that had divided Europe into two opposing blocs. On one side, the Triple Entente; on the other, the Triple Alliance created a mutual defense mechanism that made every spark dangerous. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo served as the trigger. It was the spark that detonated the precarious balance of power in Europe, dragging the continent into war. The conflict quickly took on unexpected characteristics. Many expected a war of movement, swift and decisive, but it quickly transformed into a grueling war of position. The most stark and representative symbol of this new reality of war were the trenches. Here, millions of soldiers lived and died in inhumane conditions, exposed to constant danger and deprivation. The trenches were places of unspeakable suffering, where disease was endemic and hunger was a daily companion. The incessant bombing made survival a miracle. This war of attrition lasted for 4 long years, from 1914 to 1918. Each day brought with it an ever heavier toll of human lives and unimaginable destruction. The immediate aftermath was millions of deaths and injuries, a number never before seen in history. Entire regions of Europe were devastated, transformed into lunar landscapes by bullets and gas. Italy was also involved in this dramatic scenario, but its path was unique. Initially, it maintained a position of neutrality despite being part of the Triple Alliance. Italy entered the war in 1915, a year after the conflict had begun. The decision was not unanimous and deeply divided public opinion and the country's political class. The motivations for the intervention were complex and often opportunistic, chief among them territorial ambitions. Italy hoped to acquire unredeemed lands such as Trento and Trieste. There was also the promise of territorial and strategic gains in the event of victory, secretly negotiated with the Entente powers. This pact, the Treaty of London, was decisive in the change of sides. Italy then sided with the Entente, abandoning its historic allies, Germany and Austria Hungary. It was a bold and risky political move. Italy's participation in the conflict was characterized by heavy human losses, consistent with the atrocities of trench warfare. Furthermore, military management was often inefficient and criticized. The Italian front stretched mainly along the Isonzo River and the Alpine peaks. Bloody battles such as those on the Isonzo took place here, becoming synonymous with carnage. The Caporetto episode in 1917 marked one of the most serious defeats for the Italian army. The First World War had a profound and devastating economic impact on all the countries involved. The entire production system was overturned to support the war effort, changing the face of industry and society. The overall effect on the economy was one of unprecedented destruction and forced reorganization. Resources were diverted from civilian to military production, altering the pre existing balance. A veritable transformation into a war economy took place. Industrial production focused almost exclusively on weapons, munitions, and military equipment, becoming a gigantic factory of death. Faced with this pressing need, governments were forced to intervene heavily in the economy. The state assumed almost complete control over factories, resources, and labor. Rationing of essential resources was introduced to ensure that essential supplies reached the front and the exhausted civilian population. Price controls also became common practice to prevent speculation. In this context of profound upheaval, a new role for women emerged, becoming central figures in the production system. This shift was driven by the void left by men who had left for the front. Women abandoned traditional domestic roles to enter the workforce en masse. They found employment not only in factories but also in the fields, contributing to the war effort. They took on roles previously considered exclusively male, demonstrating skill and resilience in sectors such as heavy industry and infrastructure management. It was a quiet but powerful revolution. This new employment of women was an important step toward female emancipation, even if dictated by wartime circumstances. It began to break down prejudices and change social perceptions. However, this entry into the world of work was often marked by difficult conditions, underpayment, and exploitation. Despite their essential contribution, their rights were not always guaranteed. The end of the war brought with it an unprecedented loss of human life, leaving a legacy of pain and loss. The scars of the conflict would mark entire generations. Society and the economy faced profound transformation, requiring the reconstruction not only of buildings but also of the social and productive fabric. Pre war structures had changed irreparably. This scenario paved the way for new challenges and radical changes in the post war period. The world would never return to the way it was before, and the experience of the conflict would shape the future in unpredictable ways.